You know, the Communist Party has been very active in the black community, but due to recently declassified documents, we see just how active they were. Stay tuned to find out. Before we dig into this declassified information about the Communist Party and how it's been working in the black community, feel free to subscribe, click that button right there, subscribe, so you can get the latest videos and share. Share this with your friends. We need to get this information out, this content out, to ensure that we make our voices known. Also, I want to give a shout out to the Black Vault. This information that you will see has been researched and sourced by them through the Freedom of Information Act. So big shout out to them. So let's dig into this. So as we have been aware of, at least as I've been aware of, I knew the Communist Party has been attempting to infiltrate and be influential in the black community for a number of reasons, but primarily for the benefit of the communists and the Marxists and the Leninists, because they see that as an issue, as a wedge issue to destroy this country. But before seeing these documents, I didn't know the extent of the activity back in the day. So let's dig into this. So you can see that way back in 1925, the Communist Party explained that the aim of the party in their work among the Negro masses is to create a powerful proletarian movement which will fight and lead the struggle of the Negro race against exploitation and oppression in every form, and which will be a militant part of the revolutionary movement of the whole American working class, to strengthen the American revolutionary movement by bringing into it the 11.5 million Negro workers, that's back in 1925, and farmers in the United States, to broaden the struggles of the American Negro workers and farmers, connect them with the struggles of the national minorities and colonial peoples of all the world, and thereby further the cause of the world revolution and the dictatorship of the proletariat. So you see, way back then, the aim was to use people of color, black folks, the Negroes as they called them back then, to bring about revolution in America. Sounds familiar to today, right? Interesting. Sounds very, very familiar. Back in the day, Negro was defined as a person of mixed white and Negro blood, should be returned as a Negro. This is from the census. You see that? This is from the United States Bureau of the Census. This is from 1950s. I'm sure it's still that same way today. I'm sure they didn't remove that term Negro. But see that? A person of mixed white and Negro blood should be returned as a Negro. No matter how small the percentage of Negro blood, both black and mulatto, those are the mixed people back in the day, they were called mulattoes, persons are to be returned as Negroes without distinction. With reference to the question of what constitutes Negro blood, it is generally understood that Negroes are persons of African descent. And people wonder why we have issues when it comes to racism in this country. While I do not harp on racism, things like this really trigger those emotions. But I digress. So back, according to the 1950 census, there were 135 million whites, only 14.8 something Negroes, and wow, it was less than 1 million members of other races. So back then, Negroes, or black folks, were less than 10% of the total population. But here's the deal. So even back way in the 1950s, and you gotta understand, this information that you're reading, it actually comes from an excerpt from this book that was written by Gunnar Myrdal in 1944, An American Dilemma. And the crux of his book was talking about the Negro Problem. And when you look at it, it says there's a Negro problem in the United States. I just gotta pause right here and say that is very shameful. A Negro problem. How can you classify human beings and put them in a bucket? Oh, Lord help us. There's a Negro problem in the United States, and most Americans are aware of it. Although it assumes varying forms and intensity in different regions of the country and among diverse groups of the American people. Now, this was back in 1950. You think we have a Negro problem today or a black problem today? You decide. As we continue reading, you see here where it says, now this is where it gets into definition of Marxism. This is where the communists start to bring in their ultimate aim. According to Marxism, this is Karl Marx. He's the father of the communist and Leninist and all that happened back in the late 1800s, mid 1800s. Even though there were socialists and probably even communists before Marx, Marx is widely renowned as being the most influential one. And he talked about the struggle of the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. But in today's world, they flipped that thing. Now it's about the oppressed and the oppressor. So according to Marxism, a nation is defined as a historically evolved, stable community of language, territory, economic life, and psychological makeup manifest in a community of culture. National oppression, what is that? According to Marxism, is defined as that system of exploitation and plunder of subject peoples, those measures of forcible restriction of the political rights of subject peoples, which are resorted to by imperialist circles. Oh, those imperialists, those colonialists. These taken together present the policy generally known as a policy of national oppression. All the things we're hearing in today's vernacular, you have to understand, this has been the aim, the goal of the communists and the Marxists forever. But they've camouflaged it. They've done a great job of camouflaging it using flowery terms that are very flowery, very easy to consume. I call them consumable terms, things you can swallow. But its aim is to divide and conquer. Here's another one that I learned from this document. Self-determination. According to Marxism, self-determination of nations means the political separation of these nations from other national bodies. The formation of an independent national state. Oh, so similar to the Civil War. So you establish your own nation within a nation. The right of self-determination means that a nation has a right to complete secession. Leninism broadened the concept of self-determination and interpreted it as the right of the oppressed people of the dependent countries and colonies to complete secession as the right of nations to independent existence as states. However, there's an important qualification to the right of self-determination according to Marxism and Leninism. There are occasions when the right of self-determination conflicts with the right of the working class that has some power to consolidate its power. So in other words, if the working class gets into power, then you have to have an important caveat. So in those such cases, this must be said bluntly, the right to self-determination cannot and must not serve as an obstacle to the exercise by the working class of its right to dictatorship. The former must give way to the latter. In other words, give up your personal rights for the masses. If the proletariat takes over the working class, become a class member again. Give up your personal freedoms. And here you see some of the front groups that were organized by the Communist Party to infiltrate and be active in the black community. And as we continue on, you start to see how the Communist Party, despite all the efforts and all the energy is spent trying to be impactful and influential in the black community, it had its detractors, namely members of the NAACP and other organizations, for lack of a better term, that saw the aim of the Communist Party. They saw that the party itself actually was not there for the benefit of black people, but was actually there to be the wedge, to be there to do the bidding of the Soviet Union at that time, or Russia. The people in those organizations, such as NAACP and others, were smart to recognize and understand that the Communist Party was just using the Negroes or black people at that time as, like I mentioned before, a wedge, to be the wedge, to divide and conquer, to bring down America, to destroy America as a country. And so that was the intent of the Communist Party. But see, the Communist Party failed because they did not realize that although black people, and it's something that's so critical for us to remember today, although black people have undergone so much in terms of discrimination, so much in terms of true oppression, at the core, there's a deeper reason why black people are so immune against communism. Black people are discriminated against in practically all spheres of life. They have been. But you have to understand, in the fight for equal opportunity, that same fight we have today, what they have on their side is the law of the land and the religion of the nation. And they know that all the way down to the poorest of the poor, everyone knows that in the black community. We know that this is the strategic hold that we have in this country. No social utopia, I'm going to say it again, no social utopia can compete with the promises of the American Constitution and with the American creed, which it embodies. Merely by giving black people the solemn promise of equality, that's what, and liberty, American society has tied the Negro's faith to itself. So in other words, the premise of freedom, the premise of everyone equal under the law, the premise that all men are created equal, the ideals of this nation, that is what we as black people hold dear. And that's what we, regardless of how we go about it, our methods may be different, but at our core, we want this country to demonstrate those ideals. We believe this country to demonstrate those ideals. And so we will fight for that. We will fight for that. So in the past, we were immune to the suggestions and the philosophies of the Communist Party. But unfortunately, due to how the communists have infiltrated public education and other areas of life through Marxism and socialism, I'm afraid that we may not be as hesitant and resistant. Like, subscribe, share this with your friends. This helps to get the content out and to make our voice known so we can be active in this culture, in the community, not just related to government, but to impact this culture and fulfill our mission to educate, motivate, and activate.